acronym.
There's only some digital record of who came up with that.
Only we
first.
could know, yeah. There's no way of knowing because I edit the show. So.
And we're back.
But an abacus, right? So in that situation, modeling clay. What is the safety? What is the cold bucket of water we throw over modeling clay?
The mess. The mess it'll leave behind.
That it will leave behind.
Yeah.
The potential for projectal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
First thing I thought was
I'm thinking throwing.
Missile, yeah.
I'm thinking it's a missile.
And then third is inappropriate shapes from the modeling clay.
Which is not a problem.
No, it's
great. Okay, it is a problem.
It's the purpose of it.
The just masses of modeled male
Can
genitalia.
I say? Well, here's the thing. I remember
Which is what would happen.
No, I remember once we were at a PD session, and there was this group of really immature teachers. And I swear to God, all they did, it's funny you should mention that because it reminds me now, all they did was build model penises. They had this modeling clay, and they proceeded to build like hundreds of penises of all shapes and sizes out of the modeling clay. It was
very distracting.
It was like a little army of penises. And we have a student here who's just dropped in the middle of our podcast.
For which?
No, it's EK. Anyway.
Who dropped in, as you said, Army of Penises.
As I said, Army of Penises.
What's an EK?
Which is actually the sequel to Army of Darkness. Sam Raimi's working on it right now.
Man.
I'll deal with
it's a sequel to Armies of Darkness. Hey. Number lines?
I don't know what that means.
That's where you represent, like you add and subtract.
Oh, okay.
It's just much more, and some of these things are things that work with more basic level skills, but it's harder to see how you apply kinesthetic learning techniques for higher order thinking and for more difficult concepts.
Yeah.
It's one thing to do a number line, but how are you going to use a number line for...
In calculus.
In calculus. How are you going to use a number line for irrational numbers or imaginary numbers, which exist?
Integers?
Integers. Yeah. Integers are... You can do a number
perfect
line
on a number line.
Integers are perfect.
It's like the only way to teach integers.
Models.
I bring models in?
Yeah, or building models.
Building models?
Honestly, though, man, if you could have kids, like, that is something that I could see some kids, like, I mean, good or bad, I don't know if they're learning or not, but you could take your most disruptive kids, put them on a learning model, like a project where they're building a model, and can't you just picture them just sort of super focused, super quiet,
Honestly,
tongue sticking out one side of their mouth, just... For like an hour or two on end.
Well, it is.
It's
a concrete task. And my first year of teaching was in the UK, and they had their special education unit, which was a room that handled people who, like students who they had special education classes. They were, I guess, the English equivalent to our IPRC. Mm-hmm. So they had been identified as people who have special education needs. And the guy who was, I wish I could remember his name, he was this amazing special education teacher, and he did the entire class through tabletop RPG games.
Ooh!
So it was like Warhammer, Gorka Morka, kind of. He had the classroom was a massive stand-up table with a battlefield on it. The kids made the battlefield. They made their figurines. Like they did the painting. Super focused, not a word. When they started playing the game, he played as well. They policed themselves. They had, in this game, these are kids who have anger management issues, fetal alcohol syndrome, no respect for authority. The rules are everything in this game. Mm-hmm. So it was never an issue. They did conflict resolution, they did all sorts of negotiation skills taught through playing this tabletop game, but it's taught through doing. It's not, the lesson occurs in the background. Yeah. They're bad at seeing this lesson in the foreground and taking it in. It had to kind of get snuck in an interesting way, but it was an interesting way. Yeah. And it was amazing. I got to work up there a lot in my first year, and it was a great experience. Yeah. And then they shut this program down right afterwards because of funding. Yeah, so the guy had to go somewhere else. Yeah.
Sandpaper or carpet. This is, again, something that works at the elementary level. Children can use their fingers to trace letters and draw shapes on textured surfaces to help retain the information. That's actually kind of cool.
Interesting.
And you know what I'm discovering about myself? And here's here's why I wanted to do this podcast on kinesthetic learning, because we did a PD session this morning, and I discovered in the PD session that I was a kinesthetic learner. Mm-hmm. And then I was actually reflecting on the PD session and thinking, no criticism of the people who did the session, because tons of hard work was put into it, and great materials were put together. It was great information, but it was delivered in a style that was maybe not most appropriate for a kinesthetic learner, because we're all adults with university degrees, and it was more of a, there was definitely visuals. It wasn't like they just stood up there and talked. But I sort of noticed afterwards that I didn't learn anything. Like, I was kind of like, I didn't really learn anything because I'm a kinesthetic learner. And the one thing that was missing from me from this was, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
What am I going to do this for?
Yeah.
And if you had said, like, you need to do this because on Wednesday you're going to do this, it would have focused my attention more. Now, I don't know if that's an aspect of being a kinesthetic learner or if that's just something else in my personality.
I think that a major complaint of the kinesthetic learner as they lean back in their chair with their book unopened is, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
You know, why are we doing this? This is where is this going to apply to my life?
And I think the success in what you were talking about was the reward was in the actual activity. Like, the kids
right there.
did it. So what's the reward of painting my figurine? Well, you get to play the game. And then in playing the game, what's the reward of playing the game? It's that.
Yeah.
And when you're happy in life, whatever you're doing, the reward of a successful life is, to go back to the Bob Dylan quote, it's not money, it's getting up in the morning and going to bed at night, and in between doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
But that thing should be productive. That thing should be meaningful to you. And this was meaningful to them and productive.
Yeah.
I wish we could find those kind of opportunities for kids more. You know, and
maybe that confusion in a class where you're trying to have kinesthetic learners doing something at the back while other people are sitting down and doing something else, that can be solved by, like you said, streaming according to learning style or streaming according to temperament.
But I would say this, like, to some extent we do stream according to learning style, and we say, oh, well, you know, your kid will like this class because they're more of a hands-on learner. But what we really mean is your kid is not academically strong, or your kid is a behavioral problem. And I think we associate every behavioral problem with a kinesthetic learning style.
I was going to say, but is that because of the way that the way that they are? Like, it's in a traditional classroom. But you sit down, you sit still.
Here's what winds up happening, though. The second you do that, you have now turned those kinesthetic learning environments into a dumping ground. Like, you've turned them. This is a place for students who do poorly in school
because they don't fall into the realm of normal.
Yeah, and who are going to be really well presented in there are bullies, violent students, aggressive students, physically dominant students. So who will not go there are a lot. You know, you'll wind up, and that will be a self-perpetuating thing because people will self-select out of that more and more and more, and you'll wind up with more and more of this kind of rough situation, these rough classrooms that are kind of ghettoized from the rest of the school. And then we say, well, these programs aren't working, and then we wind up cutting them, which is what we've done with our vocational schools in our board, because that's where they became. They became where you sent the difficult students. Students a behavioral issue, you send them, they belong at this school. And that's the excellent question, is maybe it is the case that, you know, that there are also, is the kinesthetic learning style also the learning style of bullying aggressive kids?
Well, it has,
you know, I mean, is that the case, and is that just something?
Is somebody who has is challenged by personal managing themselves? I think that they would definitely be more likely to be a bully.
Well, and look at the list of ways that they express themselves. Kinesthetic learners usually touch the person they're talking to, express emotion by hugging or punching.
Thank you. Ow! Stop expressing emotion.
And can I also talk about the problem? And here's an interesting thing too. We look at kinesthetic approaches, like, and I'm not gonna go through any more of the modifications because I can pretty much say almost universally, except for globes and maps, which I effing love maps and globes.
I love maps.
And computers, and I effing love computers.
I don't like computers.
Everything else is something which is more suited for a lower level, let's just say more of an introductory or basic skill and concept, and less applicable to a broad generalized concept. Meaning high school stuff, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like
a lot
more
of that
complex.
Stuff is very hard.
A lot of this stuff is stuff that works a lot better at the elementary level. And here I'm coming back to my really tough question: is high school not made for kinesthetic learners? Are kinesthetic learners set up to fail in high school?
I feel that they are, in that they're forced to go to high school because, like we said at the beginning, this model is not a model for everybody. This model, even though they're trying, the shape of a classroom is a factory classroom. You sit there, come in at the bell, sit down, face the front, be quiet, and the teacher can move the desks around, just so long as at the end of the class they move the desks back so that they all start in the row at the end. at the beginning of the next class, it's not conducive to that style of learning. But I also wonder if creating an environment where people aren't challenged to do something that's outside of their comfort zone, their learning style, perhaps that's a dangerous thing as well, because you're teaching them that they don't need to grow and they don't need to adapt.
Exactly.
So
and
it's
which goes back to my thing, and you know what? I honestly felt when I made that statement that I didn't learn well because it didn't meet my learning style. I had a really nice smug moment where I was like, it's not my fault for being a douche and not paying attention. Because I was a douche. I didn't pay attention. I think it's douchey to not pay attention. And whether I lost focus or whatever, I made a choice at some point in time to not, like, suck it up, screw my courage to the sticking place, and frickin' go for it. Kill that kingdom.
It's the danger. You know? It's the danger of teaching kids about learning styles, is that if you checked out as a professional who has accomplished things, imagine teenage Dave learning, hold on, there's a name for what I am.
Yeah.
So I don't have to do this. This is not for me. We have to be so careful about teaching them that recognizing your limitations is the first step to overcoming your limitations, right? And maybe use the strengths to overcome the weaknesses. And that's a hard thing to do in any of the learning strategies classes, any of the career studies classes, in any class where you're teaching them how to learn. By teaching them about themselves.
I teach a lot of grade 9 drama this year, and grade 9 drama is an open course. And for some reason this year, my classes are heavily male. I teach a lot of grade 9 boys, and boys, I think, exhibit more signs of kinesthetic learners.
Oh, yeah.
Than girls do traditionally.
Yeah.
Certainly I have some kinesthetic girls in there as well, but the boys definitely demonstrate it. And there's one boy in one of my classes who every once in a while, like when they're working in their groups, he stands while the group is sitting, and he walks around them, and he paces, and he does all of these things, but he keeps going back and contributing to what they're doing. He's just managing himself, and I compliment him on it all the time. He's managing his need to move, but still doing work. And every time I catch him doing it, I say, you know what, kid? I really appreciate that you're managing your energy, and you're taking care of it, and you're not acting out. You're just managing it, and I really appreciate that.
And that kid doesn't have an opportunity to do that in most of his classes.
Well, you're going to walk around the desks.
Yeah.
You can't do it.
Exactly.
Sit down.
Yeah.
You know. So I guess that really comes back to, I'm going to come back to the same question again. What can we do in high school to reach kinesthetic learners? I mean, I think we've reached sort of a point. We've reached sort of a nub.
A nubby point.
A nubby point. And I mean, I think that's really a good question to end on, is that. What can we do in our classes?
And let's throw it out to the lounges.
And throw it out to the lounges that are in lounge.
By the time this comes out, there should be an email if people want to send, or send it to the Twitter account. We'll put that in the show notes. Love to hear things that have worked. Best practice,
exactly.
Right?
Best practice.
What have you found
with kinesthetic learners? And I will say this: kinesthetic learners in a more traditional high school setting, where you have to cover curriculum.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like where you have to master a whole series of like math problems or complex physics or something like that. Because I'm a kinesthetic learner and I got through it somehow. You know, I got through some pretty high-level science myself and, you know, was able to do it. I don't remember how. It was actually, I do know how. I just decided that part of who I was a smart person, and I therefore would be successful in school because I was smart. And I would ensure that happened by taking my education into my own hands.
How many kinesthetic learners do you think are told by their teachers, these people who can't stop hugging, who can't stop punching, who can't stop jumping out or talking out, that they're smart people?
Oh, not many.
Right.
Most kinesthetic learners
get the negative reprimand most of the time, and they're going to start internalizing that message.
And to me, that's a huge crisis. And when we talk all over about what's wrong in school, why isn't somebody just putting it simply? This isn't a matter of, you know, teachers bad, kids good. This isn't a matter of politics. This is a matter of how do we reach kinesthetic kids?
Yeah.
And I really think that's the question. How do we reach kinesthetic kids?
I think I'd love to hear some best practices, but because I think that there are things that we can do, and the best classroom is the classroom that has a variety of activities and a variety of things